all yours.
Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education Curriculum Subcommittee on this March 11th. It's right about 5:35. Um, we are in for a treat today. We have some exciting progress that our school curriculum has been making over the last more than a year, but it's all coming together right now. Mr. Pennington is going to share more with us. With me today, I am Mary Ellen Flaherty Ludwig, a chair of this committee, and with me today is Colin Hostin. And Mr. Pennington, could you take it away?
Just want to, Jasmine Prezi is also here from the board.
Oh, but
So I just wanted to
I
make
couldn't
sure
see that.
to add
Jasmine
that.
Prezi.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This evening, we are going to be talking about our work around literacy. And I have a whole team here, and I think we'll start with introductions. But Allison, would you just want to introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. Allison Breedy Johnson, Executive Director of Leadership Development.
Stacy?
Hi, good evening. Stacy Bergen, Director, Educational Administrator for Curricula and Professional Development.
Danny Brown?
Good evening, Danny Brown, Ed Admin for School Support and Improvement.
All right, and then with us this evening, we have Meredith Burdick from TNTP. Meredith, you want to just introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith from TNTP. I'm a partner and I oversee our work in Connecticut. It's nice to be with you all tonight.
All right, so I'm going to share our screen so that we can get started. Second here. Everyone can see the screen?
Yes, it's good.
All right, so our agenda this evening is really going to talk about three major components of work that we have started to engage in and that where we are moving as we move forward. So the first piece, we'll talk about our K-12 literacy vision. We will then talk about our grades 6 through 12 curriculum selection committee. We will then talk about the work that we are going to be engaging in K through 5 as a curriculum crosswalk. And everything is going to be in alignment with our newly developed K-12 literacy vision. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Meredith to talk a little bit about TNTP, who they are. They are a partner with us in this work. They have been working alongside us in different components. And so she'll frame a little bit of the different tiers and the different work. And we'll see some of that connection to the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. So I did think it was important to share a little bit with you all about TNTP. We're a national nonprofit organization. We're currently working in over 6,000 school districts across the country in 39 states. We've been an organization for almost 30 years. And we, if you want to go to the next slide, Rob, we're committed to ensuring that every young person thrives and that we believe that all young people should be equipped to access multiple pathways to academic, economic, and social mobility, and ultimately thrive in life, in their careers, and in our democracy. And, you know, in order to do that, you can go to the next slide. We bring our research, our policy, and our consulting together to do that. Oh, there we go. When we think about some of the biggest challenges public education faces, it really requires us to not only lean on the research that we have available to us, but also our expertise. And so we bring both of those things to our work. We pride ourselves in never having a problem too daunting to jump in and help to solve. And through that process, we are always learning and growing alongside our clients and figuring out new ways of solving really complex challenges. And we've been so excited to work with Norwalk over the last almost year and a half now on their journey, on your journey to reimagine and grow and build on the work you all have been doing in literacy over the years. The stage that I want to set for you all tonight is the broader the broader stage of literacy as a challenge in the education space broadly, as I'm sure all of you are aware. We work with many of those 6,000 districts that I mentioned on literacy improvement efforts, because the context of literacy in the United States right now really is at a turning point of the reality that only 35% of students are leaving high school proficient readers. And so we believe that the root of economic and social mobility is language and literacy. And as readers ourselves, you can think about all the ways that you access your literacy skills through any day in order for you to pursue your goals, in order for you to interact with the world. And our students need those skills so that they can do the same. And we know when our students don't get that access to literacy proficiency by the time they graduate, there's lots of negative consequences of that. Some of them include kids are 4 times more likely to leave school without a diploma if they're not proficient in literacy. They earn on average about half proficient readers do. They're twice as likely to have poor mental and physical health. And when they become involved in the juvenile justice system, 85% of juvenile offenders and 70% of inmates are not yet functionally literate. And, while these are sobering statistics that I'm sharing with you, there is a lot of hope and a lot of research and evidence to suggest that this is a very solvable problem. And so that's where we spend our time at TNTP, is working alongside districts to strengthen the work that we're currently doing and find new solutions to a problem that's affecting all of us in our society. So I want to share a quote with you if you want to go to the next slide, Rob. Emily Hannaford, this is the piece of hope I'll bring to the conversation tonight. A quote from her. She's a well-known literacy researcher in the field. And she says, one of the many things that researchers have shown over the years is that virtually all kids can learn to read. Researchers have done study upon study in classrooms and in clinics, and they've shown over and over that somewhere between 1% and 6% of kids have severe learning disabilities that will probably always struggle with reading, but everyone else can learn to read if they are taught. And that is, to me, incredibly promising to think that 95% of kids in Norwalk can read proficiently, given the appropriate instruction. And I think the thing about it is that this isn't individual students or parents or teachers failings in any way. To the contrary, it's an entire system doing the best we knew how to do at the time, and through this process have learned what evidence-based practices are actually of high impact and can provide the types of results for all 95% of kids. And so collectively, it's our charge within a much broader system to bring about literacy improvement efforts and bring everyone along in the process, because we need the collaboration of everyone to make it happen. And I think that as we've embarked on our work together with Norwalk, that collaboration and connectedness and really everyone rooting for all kids accomplishing this goal has been something that struck me and inspired us as we get going in the work. And so we're really excited to share with you what we're doing to learn and apply this learning with you all in Norwalk. So what we're going to do is, I think at this point, Allison, you're going to talk a little bit about what we've done to date, and how it connects to your broader strategic priorities, and then I'll jump into some of the details.
I think that the first piece really is just centered around our high quality instruction and support, which, if we're looking at our strategic priority, going back to our strategic plan, we know that we want to ensure relevant curricula for all students. And so part of that work really is this idea of ensure K-12 consistent with skills and competencies, and really tied into our portrait of a graduate. And I think that we developed our portrait of a graduate. We rolled out critical thinking this year, but we know that we are at an imperative right now for all of our students, if they are going to graduate future ready, and they're going to graduate successful. That literacy is that core foundation for success. And so part of the work, I think, really started, and Meredith, are you going to talk about the year 1 and 2 piece?
You bet.
Perfect.
So, in the year 1 of our, when we first met, we were really, the leadership team wanted us to spend some time really listening and learning about the current state of instruction in 612 in particular, really focus on standards-based instruction and getting the opportunity to get into classrooms, into schools, build relationships with school leaders, to hear about, what the successes and biggest challenges that are facing kids and teachers and leaders in the 612 space, and gain insight into the current design of the curriculum, what the bright spots are, and where the opportunities exist for some growth and improvement. And so at the end of year 1, we had really done a lot of listening and learning alongside the team and through our work with the 612. And, we're able to do what Rob highlighted, which is say, in service of your portrait of a graduate and your broader strategic priorities, what's the current state of instruction in 612 for literacy? And the biggest takeaway from that work was this is a project that spans beyond the 612. It really requires us to be thinking about what the big picture is for K-12 literacy or pre-K-12 literacy. Norwalk has an incredibly well-designed set of systems and structures to support ELA instruction across the district, as well as a well-defined curriculum. And we see that as a real strength when it comes to building the next phase of progress for the district. And that mostly comes if we can leverage. Is everything okay with the recording? Okay. If we can leverage the systems and structures that you all have in place. And when I say systems and structures, I'm referring to the talent and leadership capacity by having literacy coaches in each building, having the support for curriculum instruction, aligning principals and assistant principals with the work, and having assessment and monitoring practices in place that are very strong. All of those are going to be big leverage points as we grow here. We found a big opportunity to strengthen coherence for students across K-12 in the literacy continuum, mostly, and I'll talk a little bit about coherence in a moment, but really ensuring that kids are getting access to an experience that makes sense, regardless of what classroom they're in, what school they're in, what setting they're in, so that we ensure, again, all kids are leaving Norwalk proficient in literacy. So that was another of our findings, which informed how we pursued the work this year. And then the final thing is related to the actual curriculum. We did do a review of the current curriculum materials, and there's an incredible amount of strengths in the materials that you all are currently using, especially as it relates to grade level material. One of the big important parts of a high quality set of curriculum resources is that kids are getting access to grade level content. And we found again and again that across classrooms, kids are getting access to grade level reading material, which is a key component of accelerating learning for all kids in literacy, and that the texts were relevant to them and that they could see themselves through windows and mirrors in the text, all a big strength. We found that we can use that as a leverage point when we think about where we want to go next with curriculum, which is really ensuring that we have scaffolding available within the materials, that there's access points for kids with learning and thinking differences, our multilingual learners, and so saw an opportunity to revisit our curriculum materials at some point, but not before we look at instructional coherence and the vision for excellence in literacy. So that brought us into year 2, which essentially was, where do we begin? We begin by looking at what is our vision of excellent instruction. I think a lot of districts have, in Connecticut, especially with the vision of a graduate, portrait of a graduate, have a very clear set of outcomes for kids. There's also a call to say, and in each content area, what does that mean? And so we saw a real opportunity to get together a coalition of folks to put down in writing what is our vision for excellent instruction in literacy so that we can anchor all of our work in that. Instructional coherence, if you want to go to the next slide, Rob, is how all the pieces fit together. We find that schools and districts that build a unified instructional program get much stronger results because everything is clear from the student perspective. When we follow students, a lot of our research and work at TNTP is informed by following actual students. And when we follow students through their school day, what we find is students who have coherence in their class, they're working on the same quality content in their core class. And then if they're getting any intervention or additional support, when those things are coherent, it accelerates progress. When teachers have clarity and are across classrooms, we see accelerated student progress. And when there's coherence at home, when caregivers know what where their students stand in school and also how they can be of a support, we also see progress. So it really is making sure that we are clear on how all those pieces fit together. But a coherent system can't exist until we have a vision of what we're setting out to pursue. So to put a little more like nuance on this, I have this example. It's a math example. I like math examples because they're very, very concrete. But I think it puts a pin on the point around coherence. Kids experience their day in many different parts, right? We have a very structured schedule for students at school. But when we look at what that means for kids, we see that there's a need for all the pieces of the puzzle to be speaking to each other. Because if I'm in my tier 1 class, my 5th grade math class, we'll talk about Ethan as this example is, let's say Ethan's doing adding and subtraction of fractions with unlike denominators in his tier 1 lesson, right? So that's what they're doing, and that's what he did in class today. When he goes to his intervention teacher for the 20 minutes of intervention after that, it's really important that the intervention is building on and supporting what's happening in tier 1. So when we think about that, he needs to be practicing adding fractions with common denominators. It's a 4th grade concept. Remember, he's in 5th grade, but it's critical to him mastering this week's lesson. He may need another at-bat at that. So his intervention class is doing that. If we think about extended time, he may be doing some fluency practice because we want to keep his skills strong so that when he gets to this fractions work, he's prepared. And then in the final part, let's say he's doing some high dosage tutoring after school. He's using another model of thinking about, which is tape diagrams, which is basically, if you take a little piece of tape and you cut it into pieces, you're using the fraction concept in a visual way, essentially connecting him back to what we're doing in that tier 1 instruction. Oftentimes what we find is the tier 1 teacher is doing a lesson on fractions and then interventions doing a lesson on something else. And so when we have a vision for instruction and then we also have a clear academic program, then we can get everyone rowing in the same direction so that it's coherent for the students. So that when that's how we're going to accelerate progress for kids. And this is the same in ELA, but I like this math example because it's math's very tangible. Okay.
That's a really good example. I find it interesting that the upper right, you've just moved the picture. Yes, that the intervention was a step back, and sometimes intervention can be actually doing what's done in class, but doing it again. But this is a step back that's a little more foundational. That's an interesting way, and I can see why it would be productive.
And it really supports the tier 1 instruction because that is, especially with math standards, if you think about them, they build on each other, right? And so if we're using data effectively, we know in this case that Ethan may have a gap. We're still, post-COVID here, there may have been a gap at that point where he didn't have access to that instruction, whereby doing some more practice with that, we're actually providing him with a better platform to access the tier 1 curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, often with remediation, that's not remediating, because when we're remediating instruction, we're actually taking out of the tier one or saying we need to make this more simplistic as opposed to very strategically using the standards to find the plug-in, if you will, to accelerate the progress in the grade level content.
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So our first step in creating coherence was creating a literacy vision. And so what we did was we created an NPS literacy coalition. The coalition was made up of 30 members representing various positions within the organization, central office staff, teachers, principals, APs. And what the purpose of what we were doing was, one, to really build our own knowledge around literacy. Many of us have different entry points, and so this was an opportunity for all of us to learn together around a core set of beliefs and really identify what we wanted our core beliefs to be as a district. And once we identified our core beliefs, that is when we drafted our literacy vision, which is grounded in evidence-based literacy practices. So if you notice here on the left-hand side, you'll see our core beliefs around what we believe in terms of content, access, and cultural responsiveness. And on the right-hand side, you will see our actual vision statement along with our theory of action. So we believe if we do all of the things within our theory of action, which align with our core beliefs as an organization, that we will improve student literacy in our district. And the one thing that I just want to mention when we talk about literacy, we're not just talking about the ELA class. Literacy lives in all content areas. And so if you look at what's here in terms of foundational skills, appropriate tasks, those things live across all content areas.
Allison, I was just going to ask you that question because the presentation shows what you're just saying, math and English, it's all in some way reading content and working with that. And so I see what you're saying. My curiosity right now is how, you'll probably get to it, but how do all the teachers, those that deal with the children, how do they all communicate with each other to get on that right page?
And so we're at the beginning stages of that, right? So and Danny is going to talk a little bit about our curriculum selection committee, which encompasses a larger group of teachers. We've also our principals, our APs, our coaches, everyone is engaging in this learning together with the idea that over the summer and into next school year that we'll really kick off this work with the entire Norwalk community so that everyone is aware of what our core beliefs are. And this will really guide the work that we do in our professional development with our schools. So all teachers will have exposure to this.
And I think one other piece I would add is we have middle school professional development on Thursday of this week, and our work will be continuing with all middle school English teachers and high school English teachers the following week. But then as we roll out our professional learning plan, how are we supporting other content areas? Because as Ms. Breedy Johnson just shared, it doesn't just live in our ELA classrooms. It really is something that lives in all of our social studies and science. We are all literacy teachers. So I just think it's important that as we're rolling this out, that we are providing professional learning that brings this literacy vision to life in all of our classrooms.
Okay. So Meredith, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Okay. So I thought it would be helpful. So at the conclusion of the Literacy Coalition, we have lots of names for these groups. The Literacy Coalition, at the conclusion of that, it really became evident to the group as we developed our priorities for the next 3 to 5 years that it would be important for us to consider adopting a new set of high quality instructional materials to support us in achieving the vision. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of strength within the current materials, and then there's also some opportunities for growth. And what we find in our research around high quality instructional materials is that there are some definite trade-offs to developing homegrown materials versus having a set of materials that have been designed and vetted by people who do that for their full-time job, and the trade-offs for teacher time and leader time when it comes to that. And so the coalition made the decision to embark on a selection process to look at new high quality instructional materials. And TNTP, we have a lot of experience doing this across many contexts. And so we've designed the Norwalk version of our process, which we always do in collaboration with whomever we're working with to meet the needs of each district. So this is our Norwalk process that we've developed collaboratively with the team. It involves 3 phases of work, which is our learn and prepare phase, which we've given you some insight into so far. In that phase, we're really looking to create a selection committee to ask the questions of, if this is our vision, and we bring together a diverse group of stakeholders, let's decide what parameters and priorities we have for the materials we're going to be reviewing. There are lots of materials out there that we can potentially use, and Danny will talk a little bit about the process we've gone through with that. But that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It requires us all to be building our knowledge of the key practices for literacy instruction, as Allison highlighted. And learning about the current student experience really is one of the linchpins of this process being successful, because our kids tell us so much about what they need and want. And so in this learn and prepare phase, we go and talk to students about what matters to them, what's working for them, what things they would like to see in their literacy classrooms in the future. And so we're in the process of actually surveying students about those very things so that we can use that alongside the academic data to really form a clear picture of what our criteria for any of these materials, what's the benchmark of what they need to meet in order for them to be considered. So that's our learn and prepare phase. From there, we will begin investigating the different materials and high quality instructional material products that are out there. And once we've decided on a set of two, we'll begin the piloting process, where teachers will be able to go out and use the materials, teach a unit of study this spring, and we'll be gathering feedback from students, from parents, and families, from teachers and leaders about how that went and what they've learned through the piloting process. And we'll use all of that data to make a selection decision. No set of instructional materials, meet all the needs, but they create, I would say, a platform upon which, or for a district to create a robust, tailored curriculum that will enable teachers to be spending time on the most high leverage things with kids in both their planning and their execution of lessons. And so the third phase of this, it really is where we take that selection decision and we create a change management endeavor, a change management plan, a literacy action plan about how will we implement. And so I wanted to share just a little bit of research with you about the evidence and the research around how selecting high quality instructional materials has the potential to impact learning and instruction. So what research tells us is that when we make curricular improvements, that effect size is equivalent to adding 25 to 50 additional days of learning each year. So when we're ensuring kids have access to a coherent curriculum across pre-K-12 and a knowledge-based curriculum, we find that they're getting more instructional days as a result. When we pair that with more proficient readers in dyad reading, struggling readers who engaged with text 2 to 4 grade levels beyond their instructional level made greater gains than those who worked only on text in their level, which is just more evidence for grade level access to grade level content in all classrooms. When we have grade level high quality instructional materials with grade level content embedded, that makes that decision process for teachers a lighter lift, and it's more likely that kids will all have access to those grade level materials. The other thing that I think is really important to mention is that when schools use top quartile, high quality instructional materials, meaning like the top materials that are available, student achievement increases on an average of 3.6 percentile points, which is greater than the gain students exhibit from being taught by a teacher with 3+ years of experience, as opposed to a novice one. So it actually has a bigger impact than the experience level of the teacher, because the teacher can access those materials, and also those materials serve as a cornerstone of instruction. And we know that access to more rigorous coursework creates stronger outcomes for our students of color across the board. And so when we look at this in practice, if you want to go to the next slide, we've been doing this work for many years, and I think it's important. This is an example of the impact of adopting high quality instructional materials over time, because I think it's important we manage everyone's expectations about the time it takes to get the return on investment, if you will, of adopting materials, because it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. This graph shows you kids' access to grade level assignments, so high quality assignments. When we find students have access to high quality assignments, that is a leading indicator for student achievement. And so we find that when more kids have access to grade level assignments, more kids are achieving grade level expectations. And so if you look at this graph, you can see in the first year, this was when we worked at a school district in Tennessee. We have a statewide project that we've done in Tennessee for years. Back in school year 16-17, you can see that it took 3 years to get to 78% of students having access to grade level assignments. That is awesome progress in the long term, but in the near term, it tells us that this is not something that this is not a silver bullet. It takes a coherent plan, and it takes everyone along the vertical spine, from the superintendent to the instructional leaders in buildings, to families, students, everyone playing their role in making this a reality. So when we approach our review, selection, and implementation supports, we really want to make sure we're centering our students. We want to meaningfully engage the community. I think it's really important that we focus on gathering input and not just eliciting feedback, because we want to be informing the process as it goes, not at the end saying, hey, this is what we selected, and what do you think about it? Norwalk, we've done a good job of bringing people in along the way. And I think even this conversation tonight is an example of that, to bring you all into what we're doing and gather your input. And we know that it's a change management process, because any new set of instructional materials are going to require us to take both a technical and adaptive approach. We've talked about the research, and we know that it takes a bit of time. So this is our general approach, and I'm going to turn it over to Danny now, who's going to talk about how we've actualized this, like what this looks like in action over the last few months.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things that we did was we put out an application to all secondary staff that are supporting ELA classrooms. And we asked for who would be willing to participate on the selection committee. From there, we narrowed that down to the 39 people that are on this list. And as you can see from this is not a mutually exclusive list to just teachers. We really have made sure that we have included a lot of different stakeholders, including for school leaders, along with district personnel, to make sure that all perspectives are being considered from this. I think the two most important pieces of that for me are that we have representation across all 9 of our secondary schools. There is a representative from each school on the committee. In addition to that, these 39 folks are not the same 30 folks that came through the coalition with us. There are a handful of people who participated in both. But the list from Allison that Allison mentioned earlier, this is a whole new set of people who are being engaged in the process. So that just means that we have more perspective and more transparency in the work in trying to find the right feedback for moving forward. When Meredith spoke about the high quality instructional materials, we've really narrowed that down into kind of two sets, is that we have these parameters as a district, and Allison, I think, is going to talk about that next, as to what we felt were the most important. We took all of the things that came out of Ed Reports, which is a nonprofit review source that evaluates K-12 materials. And then we put that through our parameters and then funneled that down into our committee where that group determined at a middle school and a high school level what their school building priorities were, to which they voted on that. And in today's session with them, they were able to review the narrowed down filtered version from the 3 middle school options and 3 high school options that are in that kind of bottom tiered funnel at this point. And I'll let Allison talk through what our parameters were as a district.
So one of the things that we had to make sure that we did was that we established a criteria for how we were going to approach this work. And these parameters sort of speak to our non-negotiables as a district in thinking about curriculum selection. So we're selecting curriculum for grades 6 through 12. But in looking at the 2 different grade bands, 6 through 8 or 9 through 12, they can be from the same publisher, but they don't have to be from the same publisher. The next thing that we talked about was making sure that the curriculum was published within the last 5 years. It stands to reason we wouldn't want to invest in something, that was published many years ago that's either not relevant or changes, because making this shift is a huge investment. So we wanted to use a fairly recent curriculum, which speaks to financial feasibility and sustainability, right? If we pick something within the last 5 years, there's a better chance that we will continue with that curriculum for some time. But also thinking about our current budget restraints, we also want to identify something that is sustainable for our district. We wanted to also make sure that the curriculum is grounded in evidence-based practices that support grade level text complexity and also align with our state standards. The other thing that we really talked about, many of our schools have various pathways. So we have IB schools, we have schools with dual language programs, MSAP schools, Ville schools, marine science pathways. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we selected is adaptable for those various pathways. And then we also wanted to make sure that included in those materials, there were scaffolds for MLL students and students with specialized learning that also include formative and summative tools available. And what we mean by formative and summative tools are basically assessments to be able to monitor students' progress towards achieving the standards. And Rob, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add.
I think when we go to our next slide, I do think one piece that was really important was to build this collaboration on what are our top priorities. And so our middle school team went through and they really are looking, when we're looking at high quality instructional materials, they said we need clear guidance for teachers around differentiation, scaffold, and advancement to increase access. And what's interesting is that the high school team said something extremely similar. So to me, as we're looking at materials, this is like a top priority for us. in selecting materials. Now, for middle school, they said that their second most important priority was to promote critical thinking, that they have activities and texts and tasks that are relevant. And so if you look, both the high school and the middle school both want to have tasks that are relevant and contemporary. So I think that that is an important piece that they're looking for a priority. And then for the high school, clear guidance and support for increasing student engagement with content, peers, and learning. So very similar priorities, little tweaks here and there, but very, very similar as we're looking at these high quality instructional materials. These are things that we want, excuse me, we want to make sure are available through the resources. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Meredith to talk about our next step in the process.
Yes. So I think I went through these pretty extensively. So I think you can go to the next slide. Just as a quick refresh, we've been investigating the materials. We use the priorities and are going through the materials to collect evidence. So we have a process that we use for the members of the committee, the 39 members that Danny talked about, to begin the process of reviewing the materials, collecting data about where alignment exists and where there may be misalignment or something missing. And then we're going to decide from there on 2 materials that we're going to pilot. We're going to collect quite a bit of data that we'll use for that to make that decision-making process. And we're working with publishers to ensure that we have all access to the resources that we need, that teachers get that as well. I think what's really important is the final phase here, which is around building consensus. After we've piloted for 6 weeks, we will be gathering a bunch of data, as I mentioned, and we're going to be using a protocol and multiple layers of triangulated data. Teachers and school leaders are going to vote on a curriculum to adopt and implement for the 25-26 school year and beyond. And I'll say they'll vote on a set of high quality instructional materials, and that will be done utilizing the data. And so we think that consensus is incredibly important to investment in the long run. And we find that when we take the time to do the consensus building, it really supports the change management process and is something that we can revisit and come back to as it gets hard, because it will get hard. There will be challenges. This won't be, there's, like I said, there's no silver bullet. There's no, crystal ball that has all the answers. It really is all of us working together as a team to make it happen and problem solve along the way. And so this is the foundation of a strong change management process, is the consensus process that we're going to do to make that decision.
Meredith, may I ask a question?
Of course.
So on this, I'm just need a little more focus for myself to understand. We've all been talking about there's reading embedded in every content area, but are we talking about materials for every content area, or are we talking about ELA materials for
Yes.
The content?
Talking about ELA materials for grades 6 to 12.
That's what we're talking about. But
Yes.
for the other subjects, math and history and science, are we going to be looking at those materials? You've mentioned that we do have some wonderful, outstanding collections already made. Are we going to look at those materials and then do this collaboration of everyone working with the child, promoting exactly where they are and what they need to be supported in? So that's my question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And one that, if we do a great job, which we will, at developing a strong professional learning plan to support our priorities for next year and in the years ahead, we will find opportunities, especially as it relates to what we refer to as disciplinary literacy. So, in each discipline, there are certain literacy skills and practices that accelerate a person's ability to plug into that content area. So for example, in social studies, we often think about looking at primary sources, for example, or in science, it's about how to write an effective analysis of a lab that you've done. Those are disciplinary nuance that is connected to literacy. And so I think that if we're moving from our vision and our focus on coherence, that when we do a great job, yes, we will have a set of intentional ways to engage teachers across disciplines, because I think that many of these concepts, to your point, like they cross the boundaries of one content area. So, and I mean, Rob, you can add on to that in terms of, your district.
I think that, as you shared and Allison shared earlier, so what we are talking about is really the 6th grade ELA curriculum that we are looking to update based on our Portrait of a Graduate, based on our literacy vision. But Mary Ellen, what you're mentioning is our professional learning plan moving forward. And how are we making sure our literacy vision is incorporated in all that we do across the organization? And so I think Meredith talked in broad terms. If we build out a strong professional learning plan, then we will be ensuring that there are those different components built into all subject areas. But for this work, I think it's important to phrase that we wrote our literacy vision, but from that vision, we are now in a process where we are looking to select a 6 through 8 ELA curriculum and a 9 through 12 ELA curriculum that will align to our literacy vision and bring in more high quality instructional materials. So I just think that that is important. I do want to, just because we have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, I'm just looking at that, 10 minutes.
I want to make sure that we can just talk a little bit about the pilot, and then talk about, if we are really talking about coherence across the organization, we also need to look at the work that we have in K-5. So we've done a lot of work in K-5, and now, which is something that we are constantly revising and editing, making sure that we are using our literacy vision to go back again and to make adjustments and tweaks. But let's finish up 612, then we'll do a quick conversation about K-5, and then we'll give you time for some questions. So
Great. So yes, so essentially, this is the curriculum roadmap we're following, the curriculum selection roadmap that we're following, and you can see that we are doing the pilot. We did one selection committee session today, actually, and we'll do our 3rd next week. So that'll enable us to have our 2 sets of materials that we're going to pilot. For any teacher that will be piloting, they'll be involved in a pilot training process so that they'll get to walk through the materials, practice planning from the materials, because we don't want to just give the teachers the materials and say, go. We need to do some work with them so that they can make the most of it. And then between April 1st and May 16th, we're going to be doing the pilot, gathering lots of data. We'll be working as a team, TNTP team and Norwalk team, to go and observe the pilot in action. That's one of the data collection points, to see what we are seeing in terms of strengths and potential gaps. And then we'll be doing focus groups to talk to folks about their experience, students' experience, teachers' experience, leaders' experience, so that we can get a full range of quantitative and qualitative data about each of the sets of materials, and have great data to make an informed decision at our consensus meeting on May 22nd. So that's the process. But as Rob said, the process is bigger than our 612 work. And so I think we'll turn it over to Stacy now to talk about how we're thinking about applying this work in the K-5 space.
Hi, good evening. So 4 years ago, we decided to make a change to our K-5 curriculum within the city of Norwalk, and we began to utilize a resource called Wonders. And the good thing about Wonders is that Wonders is a product that is grounded in the science of reading. Before, the state had created a list of options for the school systems in Connecticut. So we started using this resource about 2 years prior to other surrounding school districts sort of having to make this choice. Part of the process here in Norwalk over the last 4 years has always been to go back to curricula and to make changes, revising what teachers needed more of, what they thought kids needed less of, and going back into those unit plans in order to make those adjustments based on real-time teacher feedback, also through looking at student work, through classroom observations, through school leader feedback as well. We've begun to, continuously update those unit plans. That is a practice that we're not going to abandon. We're going to later this spring engage in a crosswalk protocol where we take our current units of study and look at how they align to the literacy vision and core beliefs, and where they don't, we're going to make those revisions so that they do. So this work will start in the late spring, and we will continue with that work throughout the fall.
So I do think I will just say is that this is where we are in our process. We will look to come back to this subcommittee in May 27th, to review the outcomes and to make a recommendation to the board about our new curriculum adoption. And hopefully that will be able to go to the full board in June. But it really is a process that we have been engaging in, and one that we really think is going to help propel our organization forward. I think it's important to share that, high quality school districts are looking at continuous improvement. And this is a perfect example for us as an organization to look at continuous improvement. We've done a lot of work, and now as we look to move forward, we are in a place where we have our portrait of a graduate. We've developed our K-12 literacy vision, and now we're looking to bring in more high quality instructional materials to support our students and to continue to learn and grow. Questions for our team?
Not a question, but just an observation of wonder of how actually wonderful you have seriously gone about this task, and how particularly in the roadmap, when you do try something, there's always looping back to the students, seeing how they are absorbing what you're sharing with them, how it's impacting them on, we'll find out with tests, but also on an enthusiasm level. So I think, it sounds very solid. Excellent work.
Yeah, we may not have time for this answer right now. I know we have to go. This is, and we can follow up on this. I just a quick question about the pilot program, and the kind of data that we're hoping to get from that. And I just appreciate, what Meredith said earlier about the fact that these kinds of curricula take, often years to yield meaningful results. So I'm kind of curious as to what kind of data we're expecting to get from the pilot program that would help us, select materials.
Great question. Lots to explain there. I'll try to do it really quick. And we can follow up with you after and talk more about it if you'd like to. But essentially, the most important data sets are doing classroom observations, utilizing our parameters, and also using our walkthrough tool to see how this is actually playing out in classrooms for kids. So that's both teacher moves and student experience in the classroom. Additionally, we have student perception surveys that we give every week at the end of the week. So they'll actually fill out a survey to share about how their week went, what they learned, what they liked, what they didn't like. Same thing for teachers. Teachers will do a survey at the end of every week. And then we do the focus groups which is a different type of environment, because we can follow up, we can ask probing questions, we can really, get at the heart of the matter, because sometimes someone will say something, we're like, tell us more about that. And then we code that data actually the qualitative data, we have an analyst code it so that we can see what trends exist in it. And do so in, you know, an unbiased format, so we can really see like what's in there. And then we'll synthesize based on our parameters and then based on all the data we collected. So it's experience data, and then it's actually the walkthrough data, and it's the perceptions data. So we'll put all that together, and that'll give us a lot to review as a committee. So that's a little bit about it, but we can share with you some of the materials we use. And when we come back together, we'll have all that data. So you'll be able to see it, and how it led us to through the consensus process.
Thank you.
Well, we're right at 6:29. Rob, is there any more that you want to finish up?
No, I think that that was a comprehensive overview of the work, and I think we'll be coming back in May with some more findings based on our curriculum and pilot process. So,
Well, you were right. It's very exciting, and I commend you for it. So let's close the meeting. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me
Thank
in
you
the
all.
space.
Thanks for the presentation. It was great.
thank you, everyone. See you in a
Thank
little bit.